In the year 2127, Earth was not the same planet it had once been. The blue skies that once stretched across the horizon were now obscured by a constant haze of pollutants, remnants of centuries of industrial progress. Humanity had made great strides in technology, and yet, with it came the perils of environmental collapse. Megacities sprawled over continents, connected by vast networks of neon-lit highways that buzzed with autonomous vehicles. But amidst this technological wonder, there was a new phenomenon that neither science nor technology could explain. Dr. Alina, a physicist working at the Earth's leading research facility, the Ether Institute, stood in front of a massive holographic display, her eyes scanning the fluctuating data that seemed to defy every known law of physics. The anomaly had appeared 5 months ago, a series of mysterious energy pulses emanating from an unknown source in deep space. They were irregular, unpredictable, but remarkably powerful. At first, they seemed like nothing more than a glitch, a cosmic fluke. But as the months passed, the pulses became more frequent, more concentrated, and more localized, pinpointing specific locations on Earth's surface. It wasn't until the last pulse that everything changed. A massive energy wave hit the planet, rippling through the atmosphere and sending shockwaves through the entire power grid. Every major city in the world lost power, and for 48 hours, the world descended into chaos. Governments scrambled to restore order, but they couldn't even explain what had happened. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the energy wave ceased. The world was left with more questions than answers, and the anomaly itself? It seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. Alina was no stranger to mysteries. Her work had always involved the exploration of theoretical physics, but this was something entirely new. There was something about the anomaly that gnawed at her, something she couldn't shake off. The way it defied the laws of energy conservation, the way it seemed to have a mind of its own, it was almost as if it were alive. And that was when Alina received the transmission. The message was short, cryptic, and somehow deeply unsettling. It was sent from an unknown source, encrypted with technology far beyond anything Earth had ever created. The message read simply, "The gate is opening. You must be ready." Alina couldn't understand it. What gate? And who was the sender? There was no time to decipher it, as the anomaly was rapidly approaching a critical threshold. Reports from around the world confirmed it. Strange occurrences were happening. People were seeing visions, hearing voices, and in some cases, disappearing without a trace. It was as if the very fabric of reality was beginning to tear. Her research group at the Ether Institute had already begun to analyze the energy pulses, and they were on the brink of making a groundbreaking discovery. But Alina had an unsettling feeling that something more was at play, something bigger than anyone could imagine. As she sat at her workstation, Alina's mind raced. She had to find out what was happening. There was no time to waste. She quickly gathered her notes and headed to the lab's core facility, where the most advanced quantum computer in the world awaited. If she could find a way to harness the anomaly, she could perhaps control it, or at the very least, understand it. The data was even more disturbing than she had anticipated. The anomaly was not just a phenomenon, it was a signal, one that seemed to be coming from an entirely different dimension. The pulses were not just energy, but information, encrypted patterns that defied Earth's most advanced computational methods. Just then, her assistant, Dr. Miles Tanaka, burst into the room breathless. "Alina, you need to see this." Alina turned to him. "What is it?" He handed her a tablet, displaying an image she had seen only in theoretical papers. A massive structure, alien in nature, hovering over the Earth's atmosphere. It was immense, spanning miles in every direction, its surface covered in strange symbols that seemed to shift and pulse as if alive. This can't be real," Alina whispered, her heart pounding in her chest. Miles nodded grimly. "It is. We've confirmed the coordinates. It's not just some illusion, it's there. And it's getting closer." Alina's mind raced. The anomaly was no longer a mere mystery, it was a sign. A sign that Earth was not alone, and that the anomaly was something far more significant than anyone had anticipated. As she stood there, staring at the image, her thoughts were interrupted by a loud beeping sound. Her computer had detected a new energy pulse, this one unlike any other. "It's beginning," she said, almost to herself. The gate. It's opening. The energy pulse that had just been detected was unlike anything Earth had encountered before. It wasn't simply a surge of raw power, it was a distortion in the very fabric of space and time. As Alina and Miles watched the data stream across the screens, it became clear that the anomaly had reached a point of no return. Whatever it was no longer just a cosmic curiosity, it was a force, and one that seemed to be shifting the very laws of reality. "We have to act now," Alina said, her voice taut with urgency. "If we don't figure out what's causing this, the world as we know it could be on the verge of collapse." "We're already too late," Miles replied, his expression grim. "This isn't just an anomaly. It's a catalyst." Alina frowned, trying to make sense of his words. "A catalyst for what?" "For something much bigger. Something we can't even begin to comprehend." Miles was pacing now, his mind clearly racing. Alina knew he wasn't one to speak in vague terms unless he had concrete data to back it up, but what he was suggesting felt like a leap, one that could either make sense in time or be utterly catastrophic. The data on her screen flickered as the pulse increased in intensity, and suddenly, the room was plunged into darkness. The power had gone out again, but this time, it wasn't just a simple failure in the grid. Alina could feel it, the pull, the strange tug on the air, the pressure against her chest. It was as if reality itself was trembling. "What is happening?" she whispered, trying to steady her breath. "This isn't normal." Before Miles could respond, a bright flash illuminated the lab, filling the room with an intense, otherworldly light. The walls seemed to ripple, as if the space around them was warping. And then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the flash vanished, leaving the room eerily quiet. The data returned to the screens, but this time, the readings were off the charts. The anomaly wasn't just affecting the power grid anymore. It was affecting the very environment, distorting electromagnetic fields, altering gravity, and even the laws of thermodynamics. In that moment, Alina realized just how dangerous this situation had become. Whatever this was, it wasn't simply an energy source. It was a breach, a rift in the fabric of existence itself. "We need to send a signal," Alina said, her voice steady now despite the rising fear in her chest. "We need to contact the global scientific community. If this is happening everywhere, we need to pool our resources." Miles nodded, already pulling up global communication channels on his tablet. "I'll get in touch with the other research facilities. We can't be the only ones detecting this." As he began typing furiously, Alina turned back to the data, watching as the energy pulse continued to grow. It was reaching a critical mass, and if it didn't stabilize soon, the consequences could be catastrophic. But there was something else, something even more troubling. As the pulse intensified, it seemed to be sending out a signal, a pattern embedded within the fluctuations. "Alina," Miles said, his voice strained. "You need to see this." Alina rushed over to his side. On the tablet was an image, one that made her blood run cold. It was a series of symbols, not unlike the ones they had seen on the strange structure hovering in Earth's atmosphere. But this wasn't just a random pattern. No, it was something much more specific. These symbols were familiar, too familiar. "They're coordinates," Alina murmured, squinting at the screen. "But they're not from Earth." She felt a chill creep down her spine. The coordinates were not just for a place on Earth, they were coordinates in deep space. And they weren't pointing to any star, any planet, or any known celestial body. They were pointing to a location at the edge of the galaxy. A place that had never been explored, not by humans, not by any civilization that had ever existed. "Do you think it's a signal?" Miles asked, his voice low with disbelief. "It's more than a signal," Alina replied, her mind racing. "This is an invitation. Someone or something is reaching out to us." The realization hit her like a tidal wave. The anomaly wasn't just a random occurrence. It was a message. A message from beyond the stars. Alina stood frozen, staring at the coordinates, her mind struggling to comprehend the implications of what they were seeing. This wasn't just the beginning of a new chapter for humanity. This was the beginning of something far greater, something that would force them to confront the unknown, to step into the vast expanse of the universe, and perhaps, to face a civilization far beyond their own. But what kind of civilization? And why were they reaching out? Before Alina could voice her concerns, the lab's communications system buzzed to life. It was a message, broadcast to every scientific facility on Earth. The message was short, but its implications were undeniable. Prepare for the arrival. Alina exchanged a look with Miles. The gate was not only opening, it was inviting them in. The message lingered in the air, a chilling command that sent a wave of unease through Alina and Miles. Prepare for the arrival. Those words reverberated in their minds, each syllable a grim reminder that whatever was coming was not going to be something humanity could ignore.
Alina's fingers hovered over the console.
She didn't know what to do next. The data was coming in faster than she could process it. The anomaly was now interacting with Earth's magnetic field, causing strange phenomena all over the planet. Reports were flooding in from every corner of the globe. People were experiencing vivid dreams, hearing voices in languages they couldn't understand, and some even claimed to see visions of distant stars and planets. It was as if reality itself was bending, preparing for something to break through. We need to talk to the leaders, Alina said, her voice resolute. The governments must be aware of the magnitude of what's happening. Miles nodded. He was already pulling up a secure communications channel to the United Nations. The crisis was no longer something contained within a research facility or a scientific community. It was global now. As the screen flickered to life, a holographic image of the UN's Secretary-General appeared. His face was tired, eyes rimmed with dark circles, as if he hadn't slept in days. The weight of the situation had clearly taken its toll. Dr. Ria, the Secretary-General began, "We've received your reports.
The anomaly, the pulses, the distortion of reality.
We're aware. But you need to explain to us what this means. We need a course of action." Alina took a deep breath. It's not just an anomaly anymore. It's a signal. The coordinates, the patterns, they point to something beyond our world, beyond our solar system.
We believe this is the prelude to an arrival.
A visit from something not human. The Secretary-General remained silent for a moment, processing her words. You're suggesting this is extraterrestrial in origin? Yes, Alina replied. But it's more than just extraterrestrial. The anomaly isn't just energy, it's a breach, a tear in the fabric of space-time. And it's getting closer. We need to prepare, but more importantly, we need to understand what's coming. I don't know if it's hostile or peaceful, but we can't afford to be unprepared. The Secretary-General nodded, his face grim. We're already working on a global strategy, but we need your expertise. We need to know everything you've discovered. You're the only ones who seem to understand this at the scientific level. Whatever you need, you have it. Just tell us what to do. Alina felt the weight of the responsibility settle on her shoulders. The world was looking to them, to her, for answers. But she didn't have all the answers. In fact, she barely understood what was happening. Still, she knew they had no time to waste. The anomaly was accelerating, and the arrival, whatever it was imminent. We need to develop a communication method, Alina said, her mind already racing with possibilities. If this is truly a message, then we need to figure out how to respond. We need to understand the language, the pattern. We need to engage with it, before it engages with us. The Secretary-General hesitated for a moment. You're suggesting we try to communicate with whatever is out there? Yes, Alina replied firmly. But we have to be careful. We don't know what kind of intelligence we're dealing with. We don't even know what its intentions are. It could be peaceful, or it could be something far more dangerous. Miles stepped forward, his voice steady. We're not just communicating with a species. We're communicating with a force that transcends everything we know about physics, about space, about time. This isn't just about technology. This is about understanding the very fabric of existence itself. The Secretary-General was silent for a long moment, then nodded. I'll arrange for immediate support. We'll gather all the resources you need. But time is running out. We'll be watching your progress closely. The holographic image of the Secretary-General disappeared, leaving Alina and Miles alone in the lab. The gravity of their task sank in. What they were dealing with was beyond anything they had ever imagined, and yet, it was their responsibility to navigate it. They had no choice but to step forward into the unknown. The anomaly, meanwhile, continued to pulse, growing stronger by the hour. Alina and Miles worked in tandem, reviewing data, searching for patterns, decoding the strange symbols they had seen earlier. The deeper they dug, the more they realized that this wasn't just a simple message. It was an invitation, a beckoning to explore the unknown. But with each new discovery came new questions, and with each new question, the uncertainty grew. Miles sat back in his chair, rubbing his temples. Alina, we're talking about an intelligence that has been traveling across the universe for who knows how long. What if we're just a tiny dot in their path? What if we're not even supposed to be part of this? Alina looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of determination and doubt. Maybe we're not meant to understand everything. But we can't let fear dictate our actions. We have to face this, no matter what. She turned back to the screens, the coordinates still blinking ominously. It was as if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for the door to open. And then, suddenly, the lab's monitors flickered to life. The anomaly had reached its peak. A massive surge of energy shot through the atmosphere, sending tremors across the planet. The door had opened. The surge of energy sent shockwaves across the Earth, rattling buildings and disrupting the planet's electrical systems once again. But this time, the disruption was different. It wasn't just a loss of power, it was as if the very essence of reality had been altered, rewritten. Alina could feel it, a strange sensation in the air, an invisible current that ran through her body as though the laws of nature were shifting. The anomaly was no longer just something they could study from a distance. It had arrived. Alina and Miles were both staring at the monitors, watching in awe as the coordinates they had deciphered began to align with an unknown signal. The symbols, those strange and alien shapes, were now displayed in real time across the holographic screens. They were no longer just patterns, they were instructions. Instructions to open the door. The rift. It's happening, Miles said, his voice trembling with a mixture of excitement and fear. The anomaly. It's not just an energy source. It's a portal. The air in the lab grew colder as Alina turned her attention to the central display. A massive structure had appeared in the sky, visible from every corner of the Earth. It was an immense, complex form, unlike anything human technology could ever hope to create.
It hovered up over the atmosphere, casting a strange, shimmering glow across the clouds.
The sight was both beautiful and terrifying, a reminder that they were no longer in control. The universe was unfolding before them, and they were powerless to stop it.
Is it alive?
Alina murmured, her mind struggling to grasp the implications of what she was seeing. The structure didn't appear to be a mere machine. It seemed to pulse, its surface shifting, as if it were breathing, responding to something. I don't know, Miles said, his voice barely a whisper. But I think it's waiting for something. Alina stepped closer to the console, her fingers trembling as she interacted with the data. The portal was growing, the energy signature expanding outward in all directions. If they didn't act fast, the rift would tear open completely, and whatever lay beyond it would spill into their world. We need to stabilize it, Alina said urgently. If we don't stabilize the energy flow, the rift will become permanent. It could swallow everything in its path. Miles nodded, already pulling up the system's interface. I'll redirect the energy from the core reactor. That should give us enough time to figure out how to communicate with them, whoever they are. But just as he began adjusting the parameters, a loud crash echoed through the lab. The monitors flickered again, and the walls shook. A voice deep and resonant filled the room, a voice not in any language they understood, but one that reverberated through their very bones. You have opened the door. The voice was not just heard, it was felt, as though it were inside their minds.
Alina Frotze.
The voice didn't come from a speaker. It came from within, like an intrusion, a presence that was both alien and familiar. Did you hear that? She whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. Miles looked at her, his face pale. I heard it. But what was it? Was that them? Alina swallowed hard. I think it's trying to communicate with us. We need to respond. We need to find a way to speak their language. She turned back to the screens, her mind racing. The symbols, the patterns, everything pointed to a single truth. This wasn't just a message. It was a test. A trial. The alien presence, if that's what it was, wasn't simply watching. They were listening. And they were waiting. Alina sat at the main console, typing furiously. The coordinates were clear now. The portal was opening, but it wasn't fully stable yet. If they could establish a communication link before the rift widened further, they might have a chance to understand what was coming. Suddenly, the screens flickered, and a new set of symbols appeared. These weren't just random characters. They were precise, mathematical equations. Alina recognized the patterns instantly. They weren't just alien, they were universal. The equations were familiar to her, rooted in the very laws of physics she had studied for years. But there was one problem. These equations didn't belong to Earth. They were from a distant civilization, one that had mastered the manipulation of spacetime on a scale that was incomprehensible. It's asking us to prove ourselves, Alina said quietly, the realization dawning on her. It wants to know if we are capable of understanding. But how do we prove ourselves? Miles asked, his voice thick with uncertainty. We don't even know who they are. We don't know what they want. Alina clenched her fists, determination hardening in her expression. We show them who we are. We show them our capacity for understanding, for growth, for the very things that define us as a species. Miles was silent for a moment, as though weighing her words. Then, he nodded. We can do this. We'll find a way. We just have to communicate. We have to be ready. Alina stared at the equations on the screen, the gateway to another world, another reality, opening before them. The door was wide now. There was no turning back. The moment of truth had arrived. Alina, Miles said, his voice steady but filled with awe, do you think we're ready for this? For what comes next?
Alina's eyes never left the screen.
We have to be. This is our chance to step into the unknown, to learn from the stars themselves. And as the last equation was deciphered, the portal began to pulse with an even brighter light, and the lab was filled with a deafening hum. Something was coming through. Something that would change everything. The light from the portal grew blinding, a radiant beam that stretched from the sky to the Earth's surface. It wasn't just light. It was a wave, a pulse of energy that seemed to warp the very air around them. Alina and Miles stood frozen in the lab, their eyes locked on the glowing structure above them. It wasn't just a door, it was a bridge, one that spanned across not just space, but time itself. And then, as the hum grew louder, the portal began to open wider. The energy surrounding it fluctuated, oscillating in strange patterns, like the vibrations of a tuning fork. For a brief moment, the air seemed to shimmer, as though the fabric of reality itself was trembling in anticipation of what was to come.
Do you feel that?
Miles asked, his voice barely audible over the rising hum. Alina nodded, her heart racing.
It's like a presence.
It's not just a machine, it's conscious. Before she could say anything else, the hum reached a deafening crescendo, and then, with a final surge, the portal opened completely. A figure stepped through. It wasn't what Alina had expected, not a towering alien creature or a ship of unimaginable design, but a being that was ethereal, intangible. The figure shimmered in and out of focus, as though it were made of pure light and energy. Its form was humanoid, but the details were indistinct, as if it were constantly shifting, its shape defying any conventional description. It was as if the being was both everywhere and nowhere at once, its presence filling the room, the lab, the entire world. The figure's form solidified, and for the first time, Alina could make out some details. A face, but not one that resembled anything human. The face was smooth, featureless, save for two piercing eyes that glowed with an intensity that was almost blinding. Its skin, if it could be called skin, seemed to be made of a substance that was neither solid nor liquid, but something in between, shifting like liquid metal. Miles took a step back, his eyes wide with awe.
It's beautiful.
Alina didn't know whether to be frightened or amazed. There was something undeniably awe-inspiring about the being before them, but the sheer otherness of it filled her with a deep, unsettling sense of dread. She had never felt anything like this before. a presence that was both welcoming and terrifying at the same time. The being's eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, Alina felt as though it were looking directly into her soul. There was no communication, no spoken word. It didn't need to speak, its thoughts were transmitted directly into her mind, as if its consciousness was directly interfacing with her own. "We have come," the voice said, though the sound didn't come through her ears. It came through her mind, clear and resonant. "You have opened the door. You have proven your worth." Alina's mouth went dry. She wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. It was as if the being had taken away her ability to form thoughts. She could only listen, could only feel the weight of the presence pressing down on her. "We have watched your species for eons," the voice continued.
"And now, you are ready.
Ready to understand. Ready to ascend." Miles stepped forward, his voice trembling.
Ascend?
"What do you mean?"
What do you want from us?"
The being's form shifted again, rippling like a mirage.
"We seek knowledge. You too seek knowledge.
"This is why we have come.
We offer you the truth, the wisdom of the universe.
But it is not given freely. It must be earned." Alina's mind raced. What was the truth? What wisdom did this being speak of? And why had they come to Earth? Was humanity ready to handle such knowledge? "The journey is not easy," the being continued. "To understand, you must first let go of what you know.
You must free yourselves from the limits of your own perceptions. Only then can you truly comprehend the universe."
The words resonated deep within her. Let go of what they knew? How could they? Everything humanity had built, their science, their understanding of the world, of the universe, had been based on the very principles this being was asking them to abandon. But was it possible? Could they truly shed everything they thought they knew and embrace something beyond their comprehension? "We have watched you for so long," the voice said again. "And we know you are capable. But you must decide.
Will you accept the challenge? Will you step into the unknown, beyond your understanding, into the realm of true knowledge?"
Alina's heart was pounding in her chest, but she knew there was no turning back now. The portal had opened. The being had arrived. The door to the unknown had been thrown wide open, and the only way forward was to step through it. She turned to Miles, searching his face for some sign of certainty. But there was none. They were both on the edge of something unimaginable, something far beyond anything they had ever prepared for. "We have no choice," Alina said quietly, more to herself than to Miles. "We have to move forward. We have to face this." The being nodded, its form rippling like water. "Then come. Come and learn.
The journey begins now."
And with that, the being extended a hand, not in a gesture of invitation, but in a command. The moment stretched on, infinite and heavy, before Alina took a step forward, her hand reaching out toward the being. She could feel the air around her grow colder, the hum of the portal vibrating through her bones. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing: the world they once knew was gone, and they were about to embark on a journey into the unknown. As Alina's hand reached toward the being, the air around her seemed to bend, and the world she knew began to distort. The light from the portal intensified, swirling around her like a vortex, its colors shifting from white to violet to an iridescent blue that felt both alien and familiar. She had no idea what awaited her beyond the threshold, but she couldn't look back. The being's presence was overwhelming, yet strangely comforting, as though it were guiding her, pulling her toward something she couldn't yet comprehend. The moment her fingers brushed against the being's outstretched hand, a surge of energy shot through her body. It wasn't painful, but it was intense, like 1,000 thoughts, memories, and sensations flooding her mind all at once. She saw flashes of distant galaxies, swirling nebulae, and strange, towering structures far beyond human imagination. She felt a pull, not just to the being before her, but to the universe itself, as if the very fabric of existence were reaching out to her. Miles reached out as well, his face a mixture of fear and wonder. "Alina!" he shouted, but his voice was distant, as though coming from far away. The hum of the portal grew louder, and the room around them began to fade. They were no longer in the lab. They were no longer on Earth. They were somewhere else. Alina blinked and found herself standing in a vast open space, an endless expanse of stars and swirling cosmic energy. She felt weightless, her body floating as though she were suspended in a vacuum. But there was no fear. Instead, there was a profound sense of peace, of connection. It was as if the universe itself had embraced her, as though she were no longer an individual, but part of something far greater. The being stood before her, its glowing form now stabilizing into a more defined shape. It had no mouth, but Alina could hear its thoughts echo in her mind, clearer now than before. "You have crossed the threshold," it said. "You are no longer bound by the limitations of your world.
You are standing on the edge of understanding."
Alina looked around, her mind racing. "Where are we?" she asked, though she knew the answer even before she asked the question. "You are in the space between worlds," the being replied.
This is the place where all knowledge converges.
The boundaries between dimensions are thin here. Time does not flow as it does in your world. Her thoughts began to swirl with the implications. Was this truly real? Or was it some kind of shared vision, a projection of their minds into an unknown dimension? It didn't matter. What mattered was that she was here, with Miles, standing before an entity that claimed to hold the wisdom of the universe. "The path you walk now will lead you to understanding, but it is not without challenge," the being continued. "You must shed the limitations of your previous existence.
You must let go of your need for certainty, for control.
Only then can you begin to understand the true nature of the universe." Alina's mind struggled to keep up with the being's words.
Let go of certainty?
How could anyone do that? Certainty was what kept them grounded, what kept them alive. Without it, they would be adrift, lost in a sea of chaos. But the being's presence was so overwhelming, so full of purpose, that Alina couldn't help but wonder, what if they were right? What if the universe was far more complex, far more interconnected, than they could possibly understand? What if the very fabric of reality was far more malleable than they had ever been taught to believe? What happens if we fail? Miles asked, his voice breaking through Alina's thoughts. His eyes were wide with a mix of fear and curiosity.
What happens if we can't let go?
If we can't understand? The being's form rippled in response, as though it were considering the question. "Failure is a part of the journey," it said softly. "It is not the end, but the beginning. The universe does not judge you, it only offers the path. Whether you walk it or not is your choice. But know this, to understand the universe, to understand the truth, requires you to step beyond the limitations of your mind. To see through the veil that separates your reality from all others." Alina felt a shift, a deep stirring within her. It was as if the walls of her own mind were crumbling, piece by piece, revealing something vast and incomprehensible beyond. She closed her eyes, letting the energy wash over her, the cosmic vibrations resonating through her entire being. She felt connected to everything, the stars, the planets, the very atoms that made up her body. She was part of it all. "What do we need to do?" Alina finally asked, her voice steady despite the overwhelming force of the experience. The being extended its hand again, a gesture that seemed to invite them both forward. "Walk with us," it said.
Come and see what lies beyond.
"We will guide you, but you must take the first step.
You must leave behind the limitations of your old self." Alina glanced at Miles.
He looked as though he was on the verge of asking something, but the words didn't come. Instead, he nodded silently, and together they stepped forward toward the being. The universe stretched before them, infinite and filled with possibility. As they walked, the fabric of reality began to change once again. The stars around them flickered, their light shifting and bending. The space between them seemed to fold in on itself, collapsing and expanding like the tides of an ocean. The air was thick with energy, and with each step they took, Alina could feel her understanding of the universe growing, expanding, until it felt as though her mind might burst from the sheer magnitude of it. And then, in an instant, everything changed. They were no longer standing in the vastness of space. They were standing on a world that was unlike anything they had ever seen. A world of crystalline structures, floating islands, and swirling streams of energy that seemed to pulse with life. The sky above them was filled with strange constellations, their shapes impossible to describe. And beneath their feet, the ground hummed with an ancient energy, one that resonated with Alina's very soul. This was not just another world. This was the threshold of something beyond comprehension, the first step in a journey that would take them to places no human had ever dared to dream of. And Alina knew, with certainty, that they had only just begun. The air on the strange world felt electric, charged with a sense of anticipation. Alina and Miles stood side by side, both awestruck by the landscape around them. The crystalline structures that rose high into the sky were not mere buildings. They seemed alive, their surfaces shifting and pulsing as though they were responding to an unseen force. The ground beneath them vibrated with an ancient, resonant energy, like the heartbeat of a living planet. The being that had led them here, its glowing, ethereal form, was now standing before them, its presence both comforting and intimidating. It seemed to be waiting for something, its eyes glowing faintly as it observed them. Alina felt a strange pressure in her chest, as though the very air itself was urging her to step forward. "This is the first test," the being's voice echoed in their minds, gentle but firm. "To understand the universe, you must first understand yourselves. You must confront your own limitations, the barriers that have been built over eons of your existence." Alina glanced at Miles, who was looking around with a mix of wonder and confusion. He seemed to be searching for some kind of anchor, something that would make sense of this strange new reality. But there was no time for that. The being had made it clear, this was a trial, and they had no choice but to face it. "What do we need to do?" Miles asked, his voice steady but laced with uncertainty. The being's form rippled, and for a moment, it looked almost as if it were smiling. "You must walk the path of understanding," it said. "There are 3 trials you must face. The first is one of perception. You must let go of your preconceived notions of reality and see the universe as it truly is, without the veil of your limited understanding." Alina felt a shiver run down her spine. Let go of everything they had ever known? It sounded impossible. But there was no other choice. The being had come to them with an offer, an opportunity to understand the universe, and this was the price. There was no turning back. "What happens if we fail?" Alina asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Failure is not an end," the being replied, its voice filled with a strange warmth. "It is simply a lesson, a step in your journey. But you must try, for the path to true understanding is not one that can be walked with hesitation." Alina nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know what awaited them, but she knew one thing: this was their moment. The chance to learn, to expand their minds beyond anything they had ever dreamed of. She could not turn away. Without another word, the being raised a hand, and the world around them shifted. The crystalline structures began to glow brighter, their energy surging like a wave of light. The ground trembled beneath their feet as the very air seemed to warp and twist.
Alinas Vision blurred.
The world around her melted, and suddenly, she was no longer standing on the strange world. She was floating in a vast, infinite void, surrounded by swirling patterns of light and energy. There was no ground beneath her feet, no sense of up or down. She felt as though she were suspended in the very fabric of the universe itself. And then the images began to appear. Memories, thoughts, emotions, all swirling around her like fragments of a shattered mirror. Her own memories, but also those of other people, other beings. There were flashes of events from her past. Moments she had long forgotten, things she had buried deep within herself. But these weren't just her memories. These were the memories of everyone who had ever lived, ever existed, all blending together in a chaotic, beautiful tapestry. She saw Earth, her home, through the eyes of countless individuals, each one experiencing the world in a different way. She saw the triumphs, the struggles, the joys and the sorrows, all laid bare before her. She felt their emotions, their fears, their hopes. She felt the weight of their existence, their yearning for meaning in a vast and indifferent universe. And then, something shifted. The images began to change. The memories she had seen were no longer just her own or those of others. They were becoming something else, something larger, something cosmic. She saw the formation of galaxies, the birth and death of stars, the rise and fall of entire civilizations. She saw the ebb and flow of time itself, the universe unfolding in an endless cycle of creation and destruction. In that moment, Alina understood. The universe was not a collection of isolated events or individual lives. It was a single, interconnected whole, a vast web of energy and matter that stretched across the cosmos. Every action, every thought, every moment of existence was part of that web, woven together by forces far beyond their comprehension. And yet, at the same time, she saw the fragility of it all. The universe was constantly in motion, constantly changing, and yet it was also fragile, like a delicate dance, one that could be disrupted by the smallest misstep. She understood now that the key to understanding the universe was not just knowledge, but awareness. Awareness of the interconnectedness of all things, the realization that they were all part of something much larger than themselves. The being's voice echoed in her mind once more. You have seen it, the true nature of reality. You have glimpsed the interconnectedness of all things. But to truly understand, you must not just see.
You must feel it, you must let go of your need for certainty and embrace the unknown.
Alina's breath caught in her throat. She had seen the universe in its raw, unfiltered form. But now, she was being asked to let go of her own understanding, her own sense of control. It was terrifying. But as she stood there, suspended in the void, she realized that it was only by letting go that she could truly understand. Only by surrendering her need to control the universe could she allow herself to become one with it. With a deep breath, Alina closed her eyes and let go.
She let go of the fear, the doubt, the uncertainty.
She let go of everything she thought she knew. And in that moment, she felt a profound shift within her. The walls of her mind crumbled, and she felt herself merge with the universe, becoming a part of the very fabric of reality itself. The trial was over. When Alina opened her eyes, she found herself back on the crystalline world. The vastness of space that had surrounded her just moments ago was gone, replaced by the strange, glowing landscape that stretched endlessly in all directions. The air hummed with energy, but it no longer felt overwhelming. Instead, it felt natural, like she had always been a part of it. The trial of perception was complete, but the journey was far from over. Beside her, Miles was still standing, his face pale but his eyes wide with understanding. He, too, had undergone the trial, though Alina could not be certain what his experience had been. They had been separated in the void, each of them facing their own journey, but now they were together again. They shared a silent moment, their eyes meeting with unspoken recognition. The being was before them, its form rippling with light. It regarded them both with an expression of approval, though Alina could not tell if it had any actual features. It was as if its entire being conveyed emotion without the need for a face. You have passed the first trial, the being said, its voice echoing in their minds. You have seen the true nature of reality, the interconnectedness of all things. But the path ahead is not yet clear. There are still 2 more trials to face before you can begin to understand the full extent of the universe. Alina nodded, her heart still racing from the intensity of what she had just experienced. She didn't fully understand everything that had happened, but she knew one thing for certain: she couldn't stop now. The answers she sought were within reach. She could feel it. The second trial is one of understanding, the being continued. You have seen the universe as it truly is, but to understand it, you must confront the limits of your own mind. You must transcend your individual self and become one with the knowledge that lies beyond you. Miles frowned, a furrow appearing on his brow. What do you mean, transcend our individual selves? He asked, his voice full of skepticism. Are we supposed to lose ourselves? The being's form shimmered as though in contemplation. Not lose yourself, but expand beyond yourself, it replied.
You are not separate from the universe.
You are part of it. But your perception of yourself, of your identity, is a limitation. To understand the universe, you must move beyond the constraints of the individual self and become one with the collective consciousness. Alina was quiet, her mind processing the being's words. She could feel the weight of what it was asking them to do. It wasn't just about gaining knowledge. It was about shedding their sense of identity, their perception of themselves as isolated beings. It was about becoming something greater, something vast and incomprehensible. It was terrifying, yet there was something undeniably compelling about the idea. How do we do that? Alina asked, her voice barely a whisper. The being's glow intensified. The second trial begins now, it said. You will be taken to the well of unity. There, you will face the challenge of surrendering your individual selves and merging with the collective consciousness. It will be difficult, and it may not be comfortable. But only by transcending your individual consciousness can you begin to understand the deeper truths of the universe. Without another word, the being gestured toward the horizon. Alina and Miles followed its movement, their steps heavy with the weight of what was to come. As they walked, the landscape around them began to shift once again. The crystalline structures began to dissolve, replaced by a swirling mist of energy that seemed to pulse with life. The ground beneath them rippled, as though the very earth was alive. In the distance, Alina could see a glowing light, bright and blinding, yet somehow inviting. The well of unity. They approached it in silence, the mist swirling around them as though guiding them forward. The light grew brighter as they drew closer, until it consumed everything in its path, enveloping them in a radiant glow. For a moment, Alina felt a sense of vertigo, as though she were falling, as though the very fabric of reality was being torn apart. She reached out for Miles, but her hand passed through his form as though he were made of light. There was no time to question what was happening. The light surrounded her completely, and in that moment, her mind was flooded with a sensation unlike anything she had ever felt. It was as though the boundaries between her and the universe had dissolved. She was no longer Alina, the young woman who had come from Earth. She was no longer a single individual, a separate entity. She was the stars. She was the swirling galaxies. She was the energy that pulsed through the void of space. She felt everything, every atom, every molecule, every thought, every feeling. She was connected to it all. There were no lines, no divisions between her and the universe. It was all one. The collective consciousness, the mind of the cosmos, flowed through her, and she could understand it without words, without explanation. There was no need for language in this place. All that mattered was the knowledge, the awareness, the sheer oneness of existence. But even as she experienced this profound connection, a part of her, the human part of her, struggled. There was a deep, instinctive part of her that screamed to hold on to her identity, her individuality. It was a struggle, a battle between the self and the universe, between the need for control and the overwhelming desire to surrender. Alina's thoughts blurred. She felt her consciousness stretch beyond its limits, expanding into a vast, infinite expanse. She could feel the minds of countless beings, their thoughts and emotions blending with hers. But there was no fear, no confusion. There was only understanding. The universe was vast, yes, but it was also intimately familiar, as if she had always known it. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the light began to fade. The connection was still there, but it was no longer all-encompassing. Alina's mind began to return to herself, though she could still feel the vastness of the universe surrounding her, like a distant hum in the back of her mind. She opened her eyes and found herself standing once again on the crystalline world, the light of the well of unity now a distant glow behind her. Miles stood beside her, his face pale but his eyes filled with something deeper, something more than wonder. He, too, had experienced it. The second trial is complete, the being said, its voice full of approval. You have transcended the individual self and glimpsed the collective consciousness. You are no longer bound by the limitations of your own mind. Alina breathed deeply, the weight of what she had just experienced settling over her like a shroud. She had felt the universe in a way that was impossible to put into words. And yet, she knew that it was just the beginning. The path ahead was still uncertain. But now, more than ever, Alina was determined to walk it. The air was thick with a strange, serene stillness as Alina and Miles stood together on the crystalline world. The echoes of the well of unity still reverberated within them, but the feeling was different now, less overwhelming and more like a subtle, constant hum, reminding them of the interconnectedness that now bound them to the universe. They had transcended the individual self, but there was still one more trial to face. The being, glowing with its usual ethereal light, stood before them once again, its form flickering in and out of focus, as if it were a part of the very fabric of reality itself. You have completed the second trial, the being's voice rang out in their minds.
Now comes the final challenge.
It is the trial of unity, the trial of creation. Alina's heart skipped a beat. Creation? She had glimpsed the universe in ways she never thought possible, but the concept of creation. It felt like an entirely new level of understanding. What could the being possibly mean by the trial of creation? What do you mean by creation? Miles asked, his voice tense but curious. Are we supposed to create something? The being nodded, its form shifting like liquid light. Not just something. You will create the world itself, but not in the way you might think. You must create a new reality, a new existence that can be part of the infinite web of the cosmos. You will craft something from the very building blocks of the universe, using only the knowledge you have gained from the first two trials. Alina swallowed hard, feeling a sense of both awe and terror. The first trial had been one of perception, the opening of their minds to the true nature of reality. The second trial had been one of understanding, the transcendence of the self into the collective consciousness. And now they were being asked to create something, to become active participants in the creation of reality itself. How do we begin? Alina asked, her voice quiet but resolute. The being raised a hand, and with a soft, fluid motion, the ground beneath them shifted once more. The crystalline structures around them faded away, replaced by a blank canvas, an empty space filled with pure, undifferentiated energy. It was as though they stood in the very core of the universe, where everything began and everything would eventually return. To create, the being explained, you must first understand the raw energy that flows through all things. You must tap into the very foundation of existence and shape it with your will.
The universe is not a static thing.
It is in constant flux, always changing, always becoming. You are not simply observers of it. You are co-creators, wielding the energy that binds everything together. Alina stepped forward, her mind racing. She could feel the energy around her, vibrating, pulsing with untapped potential. It was everywhere, like an invisible force waiting to be shaped. The feeling was familiar now, the hum of the universe, the connection she had gained through the trials. But this was different. This was about actively participating, about manipulating the very forces that governed everything. Focus, the being urged. Focus on the energy. Use your understanding of the universe, the knowledge you have gained, and form it into something new. Alina closed her eyes, her breath steady as she reached out with her mind. She could feel the energy, feel its movement, its pulse. She could see it now in her mind's eye, a swirling mass of potential, a chaotic dance of particles and forces. But she had learned to see beyond the chaos. She had learned to understand the underlying order. Slowly, she focused her will, guiding the energy into a shape. At first, it was slow, hesitant, as if the energy itself was resisting her touch. But then, as she relaxed into the flow, it began to respond, bending and shaping itself under her guidance. It was a simple form at first, just a sphere, a floating ball of light and energy. But it was a start. A creation. She opened her eyes and saw the sphere hovering in front of her, glowing with a soft, golden light. It pulsed gently, as though it were alive. Alina felt a surge of accomplishment, but the being was not finished. Now you must refine it, the being said. This is but a seed. You must nurture it, shape it into something more. Alina nodded, her focus sharpening once more. She could feel the energy within the sphere. It was like a seed, waiting to grow. She reached out with her mind, guiding the sphere into new shapes, pushing it to take on new forms. As she did, the sphere began to shift, its surface rippling and changing, taking on characteristics she had never expected. It became a small planet, surrounded by swirling clouds and glowing rivers of energy. A new world, born from the very fabric of existence, created by her will. Alina could feel the weight of what she had done, the responsibility of creation. She had brought something new into existence, and in doing so, she had altered the balance of the universe, if only in a small way. She stepped back, her heart racing as she took in the sight before her. The world she had created hovered in front of her, a tiny, glowing sphere, alive with energy. It was imperfect, a work still in progress, but it was a beginning. Miles stepped forward, his eyes wide with amazement. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with awe. Alina nodded, but her focus never wavered. This was only the beginning. She could feel the world she had created, the energy within it. She had shaped it from the raw chaos of the universe, but it was still alive. It was still changing. It had the potential for growth, for evolution. And just as she had shaped it, so too could it evolve on its own. The final trial is complete, the being said, its voice full of quiet approval. You have created. You have taken the raw energy of the universe and shaped it into something new. You are no longer mere observers. You are creators, co-shapers of reality itself. Alina looked at Miles, and for the first time, she felt a deep sense of unity with him. They had shared this journey together, each of them contributing in their own way. They were no longer two individuals on separate paths. They were part of something greater, something cosmic. Together, they had unlocked the secrets of the universe. And together, they had created a new reality. But even as she stood there, basking in the triumph of their shared victory, Alina knew that the journey was far from over. They had only just begun to understand the true nature of creation. The universe was vast, and there was still so much more to discover. The small planet Alina had created pulsed gently in the air before her, its surface alive with energy. She stared at it, a mix of awe and responsibility weighing heavily on her chest. It was a moment of triumph, but it was also one of reflection. She had created something new, something from nothing. Yet, as the planet hummed with life, she could not ignore the nagging feeling in the back of her mind. The feeling that the universe, the energy they had tapped into, was far greater than anything she could comprehend. The being was still present, its form shimmering and flickering with the intensity of an unseen power. It was silent for a moment, as though allowing the magnitude of what had just transpired to settle in the air. Creation is not simply about bringing something into existence. The being finally spoke, its voice a soft but clear resonance. It is about understanding the interconnectedness of all things. The energy that flows through you, through this world you have created, is part of something much larger. You have shaped one small piece of the cosmic puzzle. But remember, Alina, creation is not without consequence.
Ever action, ever creation, ripples out into the universe.
The path you walk from this point onward will influence not just your world, but the fabric of reality itself. Alina's heart skipped a beat. The weight of the being's words struck her deeply. She had acted, created a world, but there was more at stake now. She was no longer simply a traveler of the universe. She had become a part of it in a way she hadn't fully understood before. Miles, standing next to her, was equally silent, his gaze fixed on the floating planet. It was strange seeing the world they had created, a product of their thoughts and wills, hanging there, suspended in the air. It was beautiful, but it was also humbling. They had altered the universe in a way that could never be undone.
What happens now?
Alina asked, her voice almost a whisper. The being's form flickered again, rippling like a reflection on water.
Now, you will return.
Your trials are complete, but the knowledge you have gained will remain with you. You must use it wisely, for your creation will continue to evolve. And with it, your role in the cosmic order will continue to unfold. There is much you do not yet know, and the universe is vast. But you have taken the first step. The ground beneath them shifted again, but this time, it wasn't the crystalline landscape or the swirling mist. Instead, Alina felt a sudden sense of weightlessness, as if the very fabric of reality was shifting around her. She looked over at Miles, who seemed equally perplexed. "Where are we going?" she asked, the uncertainty in her voice clear. The being's response came in the form of a wave of light that washed over them both. "You are returning to the world you know, to your home. But you will not return as you once were. You have transcended the limitations of the individual self. You have seen the universe, created a new reality, and understood the essence of the cosmos. What you do with that knowledge is up to you." Before Alina could respond, the light intensified, and she felt herself being pulled from the crystalline world. The sensation was disorienting, as though the universe itself was unraveling around her. She couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, but she wasn't afraid. She felt calm, as if she were being carried along by the flow of the cosmos. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, everything stopped. Alina opened her eyes to find herself back in the familiar environment of the ship. The hum of the engines, the soft glow of the control panels, the ever-present feeling of space around them, it was all the same. But it was different too. She felt different. The weight of the trials, the knowledge they had gained, hung around her like an invisible cloak. She could see things differently now. Her perception of reality, of existence, was fundamentally altered. Miles was standing next to her, his expression thoughtful, his eyes filled with the same quiet understanding. They shared a brief look, and in that moment, words were unnecessary. They had both felt the shift, had both experienced the trials in ways that had left their minds expanded and their souls touched by something beyond the physical realm. "It's over," Miles said quietly. "But it's just the beginning, isn't it?" Alina nodded. "Yes, I think it is." They stood there for a while, silently contemplating the vastness of the universe. Their journey had taken them to places beyond imagination, had opened doors to realities they hadn't thought possible. But they were home now, at least in the physical sense. The trials were complete, but the knowledge they had gained would continue to shape their lives, their choices, and their understanding of the universe.
The ship hummed softly, the stars outside gleaming like distant beacons.
But to Alina, the stars no longer seemed distant. They felt close, intimate. Each one was a part of the whole, a part of the energy that connected everything. The universe was not just a place of unknowns and mysteries. It was alive, vibrant, and full of possibility. And as they set their course back to Earth, Alina couldn't help but wonder, what other worlds, what other realities were waiting to be discovered? The legacy of creation was just beginning. The journey back to Earth was smooth, the stars outside their window twinkling like a distant memory. Alina and Miles sat in the control room, the hum of the ship's engines a comforting presence, almost like a heartbeat. Yet, despite the calm exterior, there was a strange undercurrent of anticipation in the air. The trials were over, but the universe had been forever changed. And so had they. They had gained knowledge, vast, infinite knowledge. But it wasn't just about understanding the mechanics of creation or the architecture of reality. It was about the connections that bound all things together, the web of existence that stretched from one end of the universe to the other. They were no longer just passengers in the cosmic journey. They had become active participants in the ongoing process of creation, of evolution. Alina ran her fingers over the smooth surface of the ship's control panel, her mind distant. The weight of everything they had experienced still lingered, a constant hum in the back of her thoughts. There were so many questions that remained unanswered, so many mysteries yet to explore. But she understood now, perhaps more than ever, that the answers weren't always the most important thing. It was the questions, the search, the journey that mattered. Miles, sensing her thoughts, spoke softly. "What's next for us?" Alina turned to face him, a quiet smile playing on her lips.
"I don't know."
It was a simple answer, but it was enough. They didn't need to know everything. They had learned that the path forward would always be uncertain, always filled with unknowns. The only thing they could be certain of was that they would walk it together, no matter where it led. The ship passed through the outer edges of the solar system, the planets of the system visible as distant dots in the vastness of space. Earth was still a long way off, but Alina could already feel its pull, the gravity of home, of the life they had left behind. She turned her gaze back to the stars. The echoes of the trials, of the creation they had witnessed and participated in, still reverberated within her. She could feel the energy, the vast, unspoken connection that stretched between her and the universe, between her and Miles, and even between her and the beings they had encountered. They were part of something much larger now. They were part of the universe's ongoing story. "Do you think anyone will ever understand what we've experienced?" Miles asked, his voice low but curious. Alina thought for a moment before replying. "Maybe. But understanding isn't the point. The point is to keep moving forward, to keep exploring, to keep creating." They fell into a comfortable silence, the hum of the ship and the distant stars filling the space between them. Alina felt a strange peace settle over her. The trials had taken them to the furthest reaches of existence, had shown them the very heart of the cosmos. And now they were returning home. But home was different now. The knowledge they had gained, the transformation they had undergone, had changed everything. They weren't the same people who had left Earth so long ago. The universe had reshaped them, had opened their minds and their hearts to the infinite possibilities that lay beyond. As the ship continued its journey, Alina's thoughts wandered to the world they had created, the small, glowing planet that still hovered in her mind. It was a symbol of their journey, of their role in the ongoing process of creation. It was a reminder that they were not mere spectators of the universe, but active participants, co-creators in the ever-evolving tapestry of existence. The stars outside the window seemed to shine brighter now, more alive. Each one was a part of the infinite web, a part of the greater whole. And Alina understood, as she looked out into the vastness of space, that she was no longer alone in the universe. She was connected to everything.
To ever star, ever planet, ever living thing.
She was a part of the universe's story, just as the universe was a part of hers. As the ship neared Earth, Alina felt a sense of calm wash over her. The journey had been long, and the trials had been difficult, but they had come through it. Together. And in the end, that was all that mattered. They had transcended the self, they had created, and they had discovered the true nature of existence. The universe was vast, and their journey had only just begun. The Earth was visible now, a blue and green jewel floating in the vast expanse of space. It was both familiar and distant, as though it belonged to a different time, a different version of themselves. Alina sat in the cockpit of the ship, her fingers gently brushing the controls, her mind drifting as they neared the home they had left behind. Miles sat beside her, his gaze fixed on the planet. They had spent so long traveling the stars, unraveling the mysteries of the universe, and now, the journey was nearing its end. Or was it? It's strange, Miles said, his voice a soft murmur in the stillness of the cockpit. I thought I would feel different. Like everything would change the moment we saw Earth again. Alina looked at him, sensing the truth in his words. They had gone through the trials, experienced a journey beyond imagination, yet now, as they prepared to return, it was hard to grasp what had truly changed. In some ways, they were still the same people who had left Earth, young, curious, eager to explore. But in other ways, they were entirely different. They had seen the universe, understood its fundamental truths, and participated in the act of creation itself. We have changed, Alina replied quietly, her gaze still fixed on the blue planet below. But not in the way we expected. The ship began its descent, cutting through the atmosphere with ease. The planet below, once so distant, now seemed like a familiar embrace. The world they had left behind, with all its imperfections and beauty, was waiting for them. As the ship touched down, the familiar sights of Earth greeted them, the sprawling landscapes, the vibrant cities, the oceans, and mountains that had always been a part of their world. But as Alina stepped out of the ship and onto the solid ground of Earth once more, she realized that the connection she felt to the planet was different now. It was not just a physical home. It was a place within the vast web of existence, a small but vital thread that connected all things. Miles stood beside her, and they both looked out at the world they had once known, but now saw in a new light. They were no longer just humans on a planet. They were part of the greater cosmic order, part of the universal dance of creation and evolution. We have a lot to learn, Alina said, her voice filled with a quiet certainty. But we also have the power to create, to shape the world around us. Miles nodded. And we will. Together. The weight of their journey, the knowledge they had gained, the experiences they had shared, it all seemed to settle in their hearts like a deep, resonating chord. They were no longer the same people who had left Earth. They had transcended the individual, had become part of something greater. And as they stood together, looking out at the world they had once known, they realized that their journey was far from over. The universe was vast, and the possibilities were endless. They had only just begun to understand the true nature of existence. And now, back on Earth, they had the chance to shape the future. The legacy of creation was theirs to continue, and the next chapter of their journey was waiting to be written. Together, they stepped forward, ready for whatever the future held.